They fired her on a Tuesday. Didn't call the police, didn't show her what they found, just handed her a white envelope with 2 weeks' pay and told her to leave the key on the kitchen counter. She looked at me before she walked out. I was 12 years old, and I didn't understand what I was seeing. But I remembered her face. I remembered it for 23 years. Her name was Dora Mae Williams. She had worked for my family since before I was born. My name is Claire Ashworth. I grew up in a 5-bedroom colonial on Elmwood Drive in Greenwich, Connecticut, with a circular driveway and a kitchen that was larger than most people's apartments. My father ran a private equity firm on Park Avenue. My mother sat on 3 charity boards and had her hair done every Thursday at a salon on Greenwich Avenue that didn't post its prices. We had help. That was the word my mother used. Help. Like it was a category, not a person. Dora Mae was our housekeeper for 11 years. She came every weekday at 7:30 and left at 4. She knew where everything was, the extra fuses, my father's specific brand of antacid, the key to the garden shed that my parents always lost. She made rice the way no one else could, and she never once raised her voice, even when my brother broke the kitchen window with a lacrosse ball and blamed it on her. My mother believed him. That should have told me something. In the spring of my 12th year, my mother's Cartier bracelet disappeared. The one my father gave her for their 20th anniversary. White gold, 3 rows of diamonds. She wore it every day, except when she gardened, which she did twice a year with great theatrical dedication. It disappeared on a Wednesday. By Friday, Dora Mae was gone. No police report, no investigation. Just that white envelope and a look from my mother that said the matter was settled. I remember standing at the top of the stairs, watching Dora Mae put on her coat in the foyer. She was slow about it, deliberate. The way people are when they're trying to stay dignified in a situation designed to strip it from them. She looked up. Our eyes met. She didn't say anything. She just nodded once, like she'd accepted something. Then she walked out the front door, and my mother closed it before she reached the bottom of the porch steps. That night at dinner, no one mentioned her name. That was the part that stayed with me. I left Greenwich at 18 and didn't look back in any meaningful way for a long time. College in Boston, graduate school, a job at a nonprofit in Chicago that paid badly and mattered enormously. I built a life that felt like a deliberate correction. Small apartment, public transit, work that required me to know people's names. My father died in 2019. Pancreatic cancer. 6 weeks from diagnosis to burial. My mother called me on a Sunday morning and said, "Your father is gone," in the same tone she used to announce that dinner was ready. I flew home. The house on Elmwood Drive was exactly as I remembered it, which was the most disorienting thing about it. Same drapes, same smell of wood polish and something floral that I could never identify. Same kitchen where Dora Mae had stood at the stove every morning, making my father's coffee exactly the way he liked it. 2 sugars, a splash of cold water to bring down the temperature. I was in my father's study on the second day, going through papers with his attorney, a pale, careful man named Gerald, who wore bow ties and spoke in the measured tones of someone who had delivered bad news many times and had learned to pace himself. The estate was more complicated than I expected. Not because of the money, because of the structure. There were accounts I didn't know about. A property in Florida registered under a trust name I didn't recognize, and a filing cabinet in the corner of the study. Dark green, 4 drawers, the kind that belongs in an office, not a home. That Gerald glanced at twice during our conversation and did not open. "What's in there?" I asked. "Documents your father wanted reviewed privately," Gerald said. "By whom?" He looked at me. "By you, eventually. He specified." I waited until Gerald left. The cabinet was unlocked. The bottom drawer held 3 folders. Red, yellow, blue. I took the blue one. I don't know why. Something about the color. I sat down on my father's chair and opened it. The first page was a photograph of my mother's Cartier bracelet, dated, time-stamped. Sitting on a shelf in the back of my parents' closet, behind a stack of shoeboxes. The photograph was taken 3 days after Dora Mae was fired. I set it down. I picked it up again. Below the photograph was a handwritten note in my father's handwriting. I knew it immediately. He wrote in a tight, controlled print that my brother and I used to try to forge for school absence notes. It said, "Dee found it herself. E didn't want to hear it. I kept this in case." Dee was my father, Edward Ashworth. E was my mother, Eleanor. The bracelet had never been stolen. My mother had misplaced it herself, found it 3 days later, and said nothing. Done nothing. Let a woman lose her job, her income, her reputation with every future employer who called for a reference and got my mother's cool, precise voice on the phone. I sat in that chair for a long time. The house was quiet. November light came through the window at a low angle and made everything look older than it was. I went back to the folder. There was more. A letter, unsent, addressed to Dora Mae Williams at an address in Stamford. Written by my father. Apologizing. Explaining that he had found the photograph, that he knew what had happened, that he was sorry he hadn't acted. The letter was dated 2009, 7 years after she'd been fired. He never sent it. He kept it in a blue folder in a unlocked cabinet for 16 years, and he never sent it. I read it twice. Then I folded it back exactly as it had been and placed it in my coat pocket. Then I went downstairs, where my mother was having tea with 2 friends from her garden board, and I sat at the kitchen table and said nothing, and watched her pour from a white porcelain pot and laugh at something one of them said. She caught my eye across the room. "You look tired, Claire," she said. "I'm fine," I said. I was already thinking about Stamford. The address on the letter was a house on Prospect Street in Stamford. Small, blue shutters, a car in the driveway, a 2014 Honda Accord, silver, 1 dent above the rear wheel. I sat in my rental car outside for 11 minutes. I had no plan. I had a letter that wasn't mine, and a photograph that explained everything, and 23 years of a face I couldn't forget. I knocked. A woman in her mid-30s answered. She had her mother's eyes. "I'm looking for Dora Mae Williams," I said. She looked at me carefully. "Who are you?" "My name is Claire Ashworth." I paused. "I grew up on Elmwood Drive." Something moved across her face. Not anger. Something older than anger. "Hold on," she said. I waited on the porch. I could hear voices inside, low, then quiet. Dora Mae came to the door. She was 71. Her hair was white. She was smaller than I remembered, which is always the way with people we knew as children. But she stood straight. The same dignity, the same deliberateness. She looked at me and said nothing. I held out the folder. "My father kept this," I said. "He should have sent it to you. I'm sorry that he didn't." She didn't take it immediately. She looked at my face first, the way you look at someone when you need to understand their intention before you trust what they're offering. Then she took it. She opened it, standing in the doorway. She looked at the photograph for a long time. She read the letter once, slowly, then folded it and held it against her chest with both hands. She didn't cry. She did something quieter than crying. Her jaw set, and her eyes went somewhere far away, and she stood very still in the doorway of her blue-shuttered house on Prospect Street and breathed. 23 years, she said. Not to me, just to the air. Yes. I couldn't get a reference. She was still looking somewhere past me. Not from one house in Greenwich. Word gets around in that world. I cleaned offices for 8 years. Night shifts. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say that wasn't inadequate. She knew, Dora Mae said. It wasn't a question. She knew. I hired an attorney, not Gerald. It was a complicated case, and it was not fast. Defamation after this many years has high bars and cold trails. But my father's photograph was dated. His letter was specific. And I was willing to testify to every conversation I had witnessed in that house. My mother's attorney called mine 3 times in the first month. On the 4th call, they made an offer. I called Dora Mae and read it to her over the phone. She was quiet for a moment. "Is that what you think I should take?" she asked. "I think that's your decision." Another pause. "Will it cost her anything that matters to her?" she asked. I thought about my mother at that kitchen table, pouring tea from a white porcelain pot. I thought about the way she had closed the front door before Dora Mae reached the bottom step. "Financially, yes," I said. "Socially?" I stopped. "That's what I thought," Dora Mae said. She took the settlement. I don't know what she did with it. That's not mine to know. What I know is this. On a Thursday afternoon in April, I drove back to Greenwich for the last time. I parked on Elmwood Drive. I sat in the car and looked at the house with its circular driveway and its colonial symmetry and its perfect, maintained indifference. My mother had moved to Scottsdale the previous fall. The house was listed. There was a realtor's lockbox on the front door. I drove away. On the seat beside me was a single sheet of paper, a copy of the settlement, final and signed, with Dora Mae's name at the bottom in full. Dora Mae Williams. Not help. A name. My father had written it at the top of that unsent letter 23 years ago. He knew it the whole time. He just never did anything with what he knew. That, I think, is its own kind of theft.